business news. As promised, here he is, Marcus Carlson. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, Francois. Hi there, everyone. We're going to start with the situation in Ukraine, as Francois was just alluding to. We've seen stock markets around the world taking a hit this Monday because of the uncertainty due to the Ukrainian crisis. Russian stock markets and the Russian ruble are among the hardest hit. The ruble has fallen to a record low against both the dollar as well as the euro. It took a dive even as the Russian central bank raised its interest rates unexpectedly to shore up the Russian economy. At the same time, Russian stock markets closed with their biggest daily drop in 5 years. The MICEX in Moscow closed almost 11% down. Western European shares also took a hit, with brewer Carlsberg among the hardest hit. The Danish company has a big presence in Russia and is the country's biggest brewer. But Carlsberg was far from alone among European companies to fall back on Monday. French bank Société Générale also has a strong presence in Russia, and its shares closed 5.3% lower on the session. Germany's Commerzbank, Finnish tire maker Nokia and Rencat are among other companies with a Russian presence, and their shares too took a beating on Monday. Now let's take a look at the broader picture and at the close of the European markets. The DAX in Frankfurt was the hardest hit among the main indices in Europe. It was down more than 3% at the close. Let's see if we can bring you those figures. There we go. Also make note of the MICEX in Moscow, which lost 10.8%, adding to its slide. Now, in the United States, we're also seeing a sell-off on concerns over the crisis in Ukraine. It comes even as US manufacturing activity picked up in February, according to the closely watched ISM index. We're going to stay with the crisis in Ukraine now. France's Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius says there will be targeted measures directed at Russia unless there's a quick de-escalation in Crimea. US Secretary of State John Kerry has also signaled that Russian businesses may be subjected to asset freezes. Let's talk more about the prospect now of sanctions being raised against Russia. Joining us from London is Lilith Gevorgian. She's a senior analyst and economist at IHS Global Insight. Thank you very much, Lilith, for being with us. How likely do you think it is that economic sanctions will be raised against Russia from the West, basically?
Well, it really all depends on how the situation will develop on the ground in the next even 24 hours. We are looking into military standoff and confrontation, and the sanctions will be obviously linked to the military developments. Should we go with the worst case scenario and that Russia is effectively taking military control of the peninsula, then these sanctions are most likely.
How vulnerable is Russia to sanctions from the West at this stage? How hard of a hit would it be for the Russian economy?
I think it's going to give shockwaves, both short-term and also medium-term. Short-term, we've already seen the ruble is taking hit, and also the companies that have exposure there, and include also Ukraine, they're suffering. The markets are not responding well at all to this military confrontation in Crimea. In the medium term, I would say that Russia's efforts to come across as an economy that is modernizing, is a WTO member that is attracting investment, all those efforts that have been put in and Sochi to showcase a new face of Russia, these are all dissipating really fast.
Are there any sectors in particular that are vulnerable in Russia? I'm thinking of the oil and gas sector, for instance, or the banking sector.
I think anything that has to do with the foreign capital and also trade will be affected, and definitely one of the sectors that we could look at is the energy and energy transport via Ukraine to European Union. The problem is that it's not just Russian exporters will suffer or producers, but also the European consumers, which is also problematic for European Union, once again highlighting the need for energy diversification. So far, nothing has happened as such, I have to say, though, but the risks are there, and if you have a potential military confrontation, then anything should not be discounted, including gas supply disruptions.
All right, Lila, I want to ask you a little bit more about the Ukrainian side of this story as well. IMF officials are currently in Kiev as Ukraine is looking for a much-needed financial lifeline from the outside world. How do you think that this intervention by Russia in Crimea will influence Ukraine's ability to get that financial lifeline from the International Monetary Fund?
I think the two separate issues when it comes to the financial bailout. First of all, European Union, in particular European Commission and US have made it clear that they understand that the current coalition government has serious difficulties with gaining full control over the country, and they're willing to extend about US $4 billion in loans or loan guarantees to help the current government with its immediate external payment obligations. When it comes to IMF, they have been known for providing assistance to caretaker government or interim government. So as such, that's not a problem. What is problematic for IMF, or could be problematic, is to provide a loan now. I think the fund had in mind different plans when they were talking about this assessment, the financial assistance. They made clear that they need to do their own independent assessment. They downplayed Ukrainian government's request for $35 billion US. And it seems that they are more inclined to extend a longer-term, larger loan only after the May elections.
All right, Lilith Gevorgian there speaking to us from London and from IHS Global Insight. Thank you very much indeed. Let's take a look at a few other stories that we're following for you when it comes to business. Manufacturing in the 18 countries that use the euro slowed somewhat in February. Research firm Markit says its closely watched Purchasing Managers Index for the manufacturing sector came in at 53.2. That's less than in January, but it is still above 50, which signals that the sector is growing at least. Now, the picture is a lot gloomier among manufacturers in China. Activity in the Chinese manufacturing sector is contracting, according to the bank HSBC and its Purchasing Managers Index for China. For February, the reading fell to 48.5 in that month from 49.5 in January. The reading below 50 signals a contraction, and it signals that China's economy is slowing. And here's a corporate story that we're watching for you. Apple is making a play for car buyers. It's unveiled a new car infotainment system, partnering up with Mercedes, Volvo and Ferrari. Those car makers will be installing the system dubbed CarPlay in their new vehicles. It enables drivers to make phone calls, navigate, play music and send messaging by using voice commands. The initiative was unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show, which starts this week. And this is perhaps seen as a sign that Apple is looking for new sources of revenue at a time when smartphone growth, or the sale of smartphones, that growth is coming down somewhat. That's the business news for now. I'll be back with more later. But for now, back over to Francois.
All right, many thanks, Marcus Carlson. Time now for a look at the day's sports news. Let's say hello to Dan Levy. Dan,